Defendants in the courtroom, I believe, are ready to go forward. Would that be true, Mr. Evans?
It would. Can I make a couple of suggestions that I think might make our afternoon move a little more efficiently?
Sure.
First of all, we have juror number 26, who you correctly noted this morning is technically could avail herself of an exemption if you wanted to.
Yes.
I'd first suggest that it might be good to go ahead and bring her in and deal with that issue, because that will be one less juror to have to ask general questions, assuming that's what she wants to do.
True.
Okay. The second suggestion is juror number 31 is the one who's got travel plans. I note for juror number 31, 2 of the 3 statutory questions were answered in the affirmative, which leads me to believe that we may not be able to even navigate through individual questions. So my second suggestion for the court is if you are inclined to allow us to do her individual sequestered water on those issues first, it might dictate whether or not she'll be making her trip in a more timely fashion.
26 I don't have a problem with. I'm a little ambivalent about 31.
That's fine, Judge. We don't mind doing it anymore. Just a suggestion.
Well, it's not a bad suggestion, but sometimes the experience of going through the process helps a person to reflect on their responses and the degree to which they hold those responses.
Understood.
So I think I'll decline the second suggestion, but I find the first one to have good merit. Does the defense have any objection to that?
No objection.
Let's bring in juror 26 first.
26 and all the rest.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we can... Sorry?
Will you be making the inquiry?
I don't mind doing that if that's what y'all like me to do. I'm seeing nodding heads. And I don't think we'll have any trouble getting juror 31 taken care of by this afternoon. Well, in fact, I know we won't because we'll do it.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's see. Good afternoon, juror 26. How are you doing?
Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. We asked you to come in first because there's one issue in jury selection that particularly addresses itself to you individually, and just wanted to find out what your position on it is. Jury duty at a certain time in one's life is optional, and once a person reaches a certain birthday, it becomes optional, and you're in that category. Now, that means it's optional. It means you can remain in the pool, but if you would like to opt out, you have that opportunity as well. And I just figured that it was best to go ahead and address it so that we wouldn't waste a lot of your time or ours if you desired to opt out. But if you want to remain in the pool, that's perfectly fine too, and we would just put you back in and go through the experience with everyone else. So I don't know where you stand there.
I would prefer to opt out.
All right. I'm going to ask Mr. Sharon to help you, and then we'll have you on your way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for your service. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Then, Mr. Chestnut, if we could have the other group whenever you all are ready, that would be lovely.
Yes, all of it. Yes, sir, all of it. Let's all rise for the jury, please. Please watch your step coming in the box there. Please watch your step coming up. Watch the swinging chairs. Say all chairs. Come on down. You're doing good.
You're the first person who said they like sitting in those chairs. Better than that? No cushioning, huh? Yeah, you have to supply your own. Unfortunately, I supply plenty. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you for being so prompt. We very much appreciate it. It makes moving through this process efficient, and that matters. Not that you would waste efficiency for doing a thorough job, but when you get the two together, that's always a good thing. We're ready to resume examination. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon. It's good to see you all again. As a reminder, I'm Jesse Evans. I'm one of the prosecutors on the case from Cobb County, Georgia, and I'm going to explain to you what we're about to do right now. This is called individual voir dire, and what we're going to do right now is go through some of your general responses one by one, and just follow up on the general questions that Mr. Boring and Mr. Kilgore asked you about. I guess it was 2 days ago, would have been Monday. So we're going to start here. You get the distinction of being the first juror that I'm going to question, and we're going to refer to you again by numbers for your privacy. And we're just going to go through some of the responses that you gave when you raised your hand. I'll have some follow-up on it. And if everyone will kind of just pay attention, you'll see how this goes a little bit more efficiently if you kind of see what the follow-up questions are as we get to you. And we'll take turns, and then we'll probably have an opportunity for us to speak to you individually as well if you gave some responses that require a more private setting for us to have a discussion about things. Everybody understand? Okay, so with that, we're going to start with you, juror number 25, and we're going to go through some of the information that you've provided to us and just follow up on that. I have down here, if my notes are correct, that you currently are a restaurant manager. Is that correct? Okay. And how long have you been manager of that restaurant?
Manager for about 5 years. I've been there almost 10 years.
Okay. What did you do prior to management?
Just school.
Okay. Were you in school while you were working there the additional 5 years prior to taking over as a manager?
Yes, and also I'm a LPN, so I've been working there during the transition.
Okay. I was going to ask you about that. You said that you had a nursing degree. Is that a relatively new thing for you, or have you had the degree?
I graduated last August, yes, sir.
All right, congratulations. So are you currently looking for work in nursing?
Hired on actually on
Fantastic, congrats. Does that mean you'll be leaving the management position, or are you going to do both?
Right now I'll probably stay, but I'm probably going to part ways to go full-time.
Got it. I did not have a response down here for what your spouse does. Are you single?
Yes.
Okay. You've already answered one of the general questions that I needed to follow up, which was about management and the ability to hire and fire, and you raised your hand and indicated that that was the case. Were you referring exclusively to the restaurant work that you've done? Okay, so you haven't had any other management experience or anything. How many employees are we talking about that you manage on a given day?
About 10 to 12.
All right. You also indicated that you know somebody that works within the criminal justice system or the court system. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Can you tell me, you don't have to give me the person's name, but who is the person? Like, what does that person do?
She works in the clerk's office.
All right. So right downstairs on the first floor then, is that correct? Or is it Superior Court or is it State Court?
I think it's state.
And how well do you know this person?
She's my daughter's grandmother.
Okay. Is there anything about you being related to, somewhat related to somebody who's in the court system that would in any way impact your ability to be an impartial juror in this case? Not going to have any effect on anything. Okay. You also know somebody in law enforcement.
Yes.
Will you tell me about that, please?
They work at Lexi.
Okay. As an instructor?
Yes.
And who is this person to you? Is it a relative or friend?
Well, it's been a long time neighbor, so he's kind of like a uncle to me, but...
For those of us that are familiar, and all of you probably are familiar with FLETC because you live down here, we know that that's a law enforcement training center specifically for the federal government. Did he serve in some law enforcement capacity prior to becoming an instructor? Do you know?
I'm not really sure.
Okay. All the years that you've known this individual, he's worked just as an instructor. Sometimes they have people that are, for example, DEA or FBI, could be Homeland Security. I just didn't know if you happen to know which one he might be specialized in.
I think Homeland Security.
Homeland. Similarly, you indicated that you know at least one person in the military, has some military background. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me about that, please?
My cousin, he's in the Army.
Currently?
Yes.
Okay. And also, anyone else or just your cousin?
That's probably the most relative to me.
What about in the medical profession? Is that because of your training as LPN?
Yes, and my mother, she works at the hospital as well.
What did she do at the hospital?
She's a medical girl at the front desk at his office.
All right. There were a series of questions that we asked you involving trying to get to know a little bit better how technologically savvy you are, so to speak. In other words, are you familiar with certain apps and messaging and things like that? And I had a notation down here that you in addition to text message, you might use some apps to do some messaging and things like that. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we went through a whole list. First of all, let's start off with some basic ones that most people are involved in. Facebook?
Yes.
Okay. You ever use Facebook Messenger?
Yes, sir.
You text?
Yes.
What other messaging applications do you typically use?
Well, when we were on a cruise, we used a WhatsApp, and that's about it.
That's, as I understand, it's like internet-based, so it's good for international trips. All right, there was a list of other applications, and I want to ask you about them just to see if you're familiar with any of them. So let me go through the list first, and then I'll just ask you collectively which, if any, you might know about. Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Craigslist, and then Kick, Scout, and Whisper. Are you familiar with any of those?
All except the last two.
Okay, the last two I said were Scout and Whisper. Have you even heard of those?
No, never even heard of them.
Okay, but Instagram, do you have an Instagram account?
I do.
And what about Twitter?
I have one, but it's not active.
Okay.
I never deleted it.
YouTube, what do you use YouTube for?
Just looking up like videos, music.
A lot of people do that these days. Free music.
Yeah, for music.
Okay. And what about Craigslist?
I'm familiar with it, don't really use it.
And then finally Kick.
I don't know what Kick is, I'm sorry.
Okay, so that would be the last three then.
Yeah,
Kick, Scout, and Whisper.
Okay.
There was a question that asked about whether you've interacted with somebody that you didn't know online in any capacity, and I believe you're one of the many jurors that said that applies to you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
I've used an online dating app before.
All right. Okay. I think that you indicated that you have some legal interests of some sort. Is that correct? There was a broad series of questions we asked you about legal TV shows or movies or books, maybe include docudramas and things like that. Did you raise your hand to any of those questions?
Yes, I like the CSI, SVU, Criminal Minds.
You can't just say CSI these days. You got to go CSI like Des Moines or CSI whatever. Okay, so CSI, what did you say, SVU? Okay. It sounds like mostly the fiction shows for you, is that correct? You understand there's a big difference between the fictional TV world versus the reality of the exciting stuff that goes on in the courtroom, correct? Some people come in and they actually say, well, no, I expect that you could actually do things like CSI and all that. You don't fall into that category, do you?
No, I know it's fiction.
Okay. You indicated that you've worked as a caretaker before, is that correct? For who?
My grandmother, she has Alzheimer's.
You currently work as a caretaker?
No, I mean, I will be, but not currently.
Okay. There are just instances where you have to help her out because of her Alzheimer's. I understand. And then I believe you indicated that you've got one child, is that correct?
1 3-year-old daughter, yes, sir.
All right, which would explain the answer to the next question is, do you regularly transport a child in every day? And let's see, age of 3, is she going to any sort of daycare or anything like that?
Goes to the local daycare.
All right. There are several other questions that I believe I need to ask you, but I think we're going to do that in an individual capacity. So we'll just stand by on that, and I'm going to get back to you on those questions in just a bit. Thank you, ma'am. Hey,
did I hear you say that you had worked at this particular restaurant for 5 years?
No, sir, almost 10. Next year will be 10 years.
Almost 10. Okay. Is it a family-owned restaurant by any chance? Okay. Because I'm looking at your age thinking...
I started when I was 15. It was my first job.
Okay.
I've been there ever since.
All right, and that explains. All right, and so you're indicating that you take your daughter to daycare every day, and do you have a regular schedule that you have to be at work at a certain time, Saturday, Monday through Saturday, or whatever?
Yes, sir.
You do?
Well, not Monday through Saturday. I normally get 2 days off at my leisure.
Okay. So you work day shift?
Day shift, yes, sir.
Right. What time have you got to be in?
8 to 5.
Oh, okay.
And I'm at leisure by 7:30, 7:45 at the latest.
All right. All right. And is the restaurant in the same part of the county where you live?
Yes, sir.
It is. Okay. Is the daycare on the way?
It's a little bit out of the way, but I just make a normal route. I take a normal route every day.
Okay. Same route every day?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you've got a routine. All right. And does she have breakfast at the daycare, or do you feed her before y'all go?
I normally always try to feed her something, but they do give they offer breakfast every single day.
Okay. You said normally, so sometimes you might feed her at the house, sometimes not.
Well, I give her if anything, if I don't cook a full breakfast, then I give her a yogurt or a banana, something
Right.
small, and then if she wants anything else that's available at daycare.
Okay.
So I'll always feed her.
So sometimes she might have something to eat on the way in the
Yes.
in the car.
Yes.
Okay. And obviously she's still in a car seat of some sort, right? Sits behind you.
Yes.
All right.
Well, behind the passenger side, they're supposed to be behind the
Passenger side. Okay. So your seat isn't one that sits in the middle.
No.
All right. Do you ever make a stop, like for donuts or a biscuit or coffee or gas or dry cleaning or anything like that? How often do you change your routine in the morning where you've got some additional stop that you make?
I would say maybe once a week.
Okay. And those changes to your routine, they're not on the same day every week, and they're not to the same place every time you make a stop, right? In other words, one morning you might have to stop for gas, and then 2 weeks later you might stop for coffee.
Yes.
Something like that. All right. All right. And then do you do the pickup every day as well?
Yes. Normally every day. If not, it's either my mother or her grandfather.
Okay. So you've got some help.
Yes.
All right. Does Dad ever help out?
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay. And y'all have not been married?
Never.
Okay. Dad live here in the county?
He does.
Okay. All right. Now, you seem very responsible for somebody your age. But as a young lady, do you ever make the most of your time in the car by maybe doing makeup or maybe eating your breakfast, or
No.
it's totally focused on driving? Okay. Do you live on the island?
No.
Okay. You don't have to take the causeway in the morning? Okay. Do you have any traffic in the morning?
Like coming out of my neighborhood is kind of hefty, but I normally beat the crowd.
Okay. Because you're going early. You're going early.
To school. Because normally it's more traffic heavy around like 8 o'clock, so I kind of beat that by 30 minutes, give or take.
Okay. I want to follow up on a few of the questions that I asked you about. Okay. You answered that you had, in fact, heard of public service announcements reminding parents to double-check their car for children. Where do you think you've heard those public service announcements?
On the news. And it'll say, like, if the weather's, like, over a certain degrees, they'll make sure to check your animals or
Okay.
the same thing.
On the TV news? All right. And how long have you been aware of those public service announcements?
Just within the last year or two, it's been very more
Last few years?
aware to the public.
All right. And have you heard these announcements, both reminders regarding children as well as animals?
Yeah. Yes.
Both? Okay. All right. And you did some sort of research into the safety of car seats before you bought a car seat?
Yes.
How did you do that research?
Online.
Okay. And what was it you were looking for?
Just like overall ratings of their safety and like the different brands like Graco, First Safety, stuff like that.
Okay. You wanted safety first.
Safety first, yes, I'm sorry.
That's why you were doing the research. Okay. And you did it online. All right. Did you order your car seat, or did you go into the store to check it out?
I ordered it online.
Okay. All right, and I believe you said your daughter fell into that category of children who fall asleep pretty easily once you put them in a car seat.
And then, she had colic, so sometimes I would have to literally drive around just to see her.
Okay. And that seemed to get the job done. All right. You told us that at one time you have contested a traffic citation. What kind of ticket was it?
They claimed that I was going in and out of traffic like weaving.
That's what they claimed?
Yes.
Okay. What do you claim?
I was guilty.
Okay. How'd you do in court?
He took it to where it wasn't on my parents' insurance.
I bet your parents were happy about that.
Yeah, that's how I went.
Okay. All right, good for you. All right. Okay. I got a couple things that we're going to follow up in private, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. All
Right, we are to you, juror number 27. And I'm going to ask you to do this, and this applies to everyone as well. Let's make sure we keep our voices raised so that everybody can hear. That way sometimes it'll cut down on having to ask the same question twice by both attorneys. We'll make sure we all get the answer. Okay, we're going to start off with a little bit of background for you, juror 27. And I have down here that you are a high school science teacher, correct?
Yes, sir.
How long have you been doing that?
I have been in a high school setting for this is my 15th year.
Okay, great. And you said in high school settings, so I assume you've done some education before that as well.
I did.
Tell me about that.
I did environmental education at three different facilities.
When you say facilities, we're not talking about schools and some sort of other training?
I worked for a Marine Institute in California, as well as for the University of Georgia, multiple locations here.
And is that what kind of segued you into wanting to teach at a different level, but continuing on with the science background?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And are you from here, or are you're a transplant?
I am.
Tell me a little bit about your background and what brought you to Glenn County.
I grew up in the Midwest, and I originally moved to California after college to pursue marine biology, and California was not my cup of tea. So I went back to Ohio, and I applied for a job within UGA's, and they called me and asked me to apply for a different position, but to take one in the meantime. Mm-hmm. And then I moved here and met my husband and never left.
Okay. And I have down here that I was writing so quickly, so I might get you just to explain. All I wrote down is your husband is somehow involved in hotels. Is that correct?
My husband is.
Yes. Tell me about that.
He's a commercial real estate appraiser, and he specializes in hotels and resorts in the Southeast Caribbean.
All right. Who do you know that works in prosecution?
We have a friend that we spend a lot of time with here who works for the prosecutor's office.
In this circuit?
Yes, sir. In a different county, but in Georgia.
What county?
It's Fayetteville.
All right. You also know somebody that works for the defense. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell me.
We have multiple friends that are attorneys.
All right.
Here locally, we have a couple of friends that are defense attorneys here in Glenn County, and then I also grew up with people who are attorneys in the Midwest.
So it's not uncommon for somebody, for example, were to ask me, hey, do you know attorneys? I would clearly raise my hand because that's who I work with day in and day out, but we don't always get that response from the general public. How is it that you came to know these individuals? Did you go to school with them, or?
The ones in the Midwest I did go to school with. The ones that are local I've just met through friends, and we occasionally hang out socially.
Gotcha. You've also, if my notes are correct, worked for a defense group or a defense organization. Has that been associated with them? We listed some of them to include, for instance, the Innocence Project and those types of things.
I am familiar with the Innocence Project myself because of the subject that I teach, but I have friends that work just in various groups of law.
All right. And I think you've already answered this question. You're familiar with the court system and people that work within the court system because of some of these individuals that you've mentioned to us already. What about management and being able to hire and fire individuals? You indicated that you have that in your background.
I did. I was a director of a summer camp for 2 summers in Athens, Georgia. And part of my job was to oversee the counselors that were taking care of the campers and had to hire and fire.
Okay. Do you also know some individuals in law enforcement?
I do.
Tell me about that.
Ex-brother-in-law is a police officer for the city of Brunswick. And then I have a friend who is a former GBI narcotics agent.
Is there anything about your relationship with these 2 individuals that would in any way impair your ability to be fair and impartial in this case?
That would not.
Okay. And I know we've got some questions that I need to get into with you, and you've already given us some responses, so we'll get into that in a more individual capacity if we could. Similarly, I think that you indicated that you know people in the legal profession. I think we've talked about that. Unless there's somebody else you're thinking of, I'm going to move on to the next topic. Who do you know in the medical profession?
My mother is a retired nurse, and I have multiple friends that are nurses or doctors here locally and as well as out of state.
You've got quite a Rolodex, I bet. It sounds like you know quite a lot of people. You also know somebody that works in the mental health profession.
I do, my next door neighbor.
And what about somebody who works in the field of neuroscience?
Yes, one of my good friends is a pediatric neurologist. She just opened a practice here in Glenn County.
All right. Almost all of our educators, when they're asked the question about knowing somebody in DFACS, raised their hand, and most of them said that it's because of their employment and background. You also raised your hand. Am I to assume that that's how you know somebody in DFACS, or is there some other capacity as well?
Socially as well.
All right. Who's the person you know socially? Not in the name, but how do you know them?
I have friends that work directly for DFACS and Safe Harbor and CASA.
I have down here that you regularly attend a church or affiliated with a church organization.
Yes, sir.
Which church is that?
The chapel, which is here in Brunswick.
And then there was a big question that asked, I call it the fraternal organization question, because it starts off with that, but it also covers other things as well, professional organizations and things like that. You raised your hand for that. What were you thinking of when we asked that question?
I'm a member of multiple science teacher organizations nationally, statewide. I'm a female educator. It's a all sorority, but organization that way.
There was a series of questions we asked about familiarity with messaging applications and things like that. You indicated that you have some familiarity with that, correct?
Yes,
Text?
Yes.
Facebook?
Yes.
What about that whole list of other things? We'll start with the most popular first.
I can tell you the only one that I haven't heard of was Scout.
Okay. So you've heard of Kick and Whisper.
Yes.
Have you used Kick or Whisper yourself? Okay.
I do not, but because of my job, I try to instill in my students to be careful with their social media, and so I read up on that frequently so that I can try to help them not make choices that are going to jeopardize scholarships and such in the future.
I was about to ask that. I would think, particularly at a high school level, being a high school educator, you're probably more in tune with the applications that younger crowd is tending to use. Would you agree with that assessment?
I'm probably more in tune with it, but I still don't know how to use a lot of it.
That makes sense, right? Well, nor probably would you want to in some instances. But Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, are you familiar with all of
I'm
that?
familiar with all of them.
Okay. And what about YouTube and Craigslist?
I have used Craigslist to sell baby stuff, but other than that, I haven't used it for anything else. And I, of course, use YouTube for music and how-to videos.
You'd indicated that you have communicated with somebody online that you didn't know before in some capacity. Can you explain what you're thinking of?
Through Facebook, I'm in multiple groups. I'm in a gardening group and a group for dachshunds because I have a pet dachshund. So I do interact with people that I know for, I guess, practical purposes.
Okay. There was a question that asked, basically generally, have you ever posted an opinion online or in some way in online capacity? And first of all, was it about this case or about something else?
Both.
Okay. Let's not talk about that question right now, then. I'm going to get to that in a minute. I figure that might be the case, and since we need to take up some topics with you individually, we'll take that one up then, too. Legal interests, broad series of questions that ask you about fiction and nonfiction legal interests, and I believe you indicated you had some.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about that.
We only have had cable for a short period of time. Again, we've been gone without for a long time. I prefer.
How was that?
Actually, wonderful.
Okay.
It was wonderful. We're temporarily living somewhere where we have cable as part of our package, and I'm looking forward to not having it again. But I do enjoy fictional shows, but I prefer the documentaries more so.
All right. And that dovetails very nicely to my next question about docudramas that you've seen. Can you identify some of them for me?
Anything on iDiscovery. I've watched on Netflix the Making of the Murderer series. I'm not sure if there are many others that I can't think
Sure.
of at the moment.
All right. You've also indicated in similar fashion that you followed a trial before. That can mean several things, obviously. One, you kind of follow it remotely from TV and paying attention to it in the news. And some people actually enjoy going to the courthouse and attending. And you're saying no to that latter question.
I don't have time for that.
Okay. Which trials have you kept up with?
Pretty much anything that's mainstream media I pay attention to. So I can, y'all mentioned the O.J. Simpson trial, and I followed the Michael Jackson thing, things of that nature.
On the scale, it sounds like you're pretty heavy into the realities, the stuff that's going on.
And locally, we had some cases that were high profile as well. I paid attention to. to.
You indicated that you volunteered with children in some capacity in the past. Can you tell me about that?
With educational programs on camps.
I wanted to ask you about your prior answer. When you were the director of that summer camp, was that a volunteer basis or was that something you're hired to do?
That one I was hired to do, but I also have volunteered with some camps as well.
I see. You indicated that you know individuals that have either been arrested or court-martialed.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
You can't choose your family. So I have several family members that have...
I would have to answer the question, too.
DUI, domestic disputes, things of that nature.
Is the domestic dispute probably the most serious you can think of, or anything even close to what we're dealing with in this case? Is there anything about having family members, maybe people you know that have dealt with those situations that you think might in any way impact your ability to be fair? Just that issue alone. You've given a statement to law enforcement before. Tell me about that.
I've had a house broken into while I was at home and had to provide a statement for that. Car accidents, I've had to do multiple statements as part of my job.
All right. There was a question that was posed, have you ever had to make some sort of report of abuse or deal with a report of some sort of abuse? And you said that you had. Was that in a work capacity?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And of course, as an educator, as in law enforcement, you're a mandated reporter. So on how many occasions do you think you've had to do that during your career? If you had to guess, I won't hold you to it.
Maybe 15.
There was a question asked if anyone has ever suffered from the sudden loss of a child, and I think you indicated that you had, or know somebody that falls into that category. Who is that?
We have friends that live here locally that lost an infant due to health issues. One of my former students that I have kept in touch with recently lost cancer, and then I've had students that have passed away in car accidents.
Okay. I think I'm almost done. Other than, do you know somebody that's engaged in some sort of romantic relationship online? Is that correct?
I know people that have met online.
Okay, online dating and things like that. And then transport of children. You raised your hand for that as well. Tell me about that.
Well, I have an 8-year-old daughter.
Right.
Since in a booster seat, so I've been transporting her regularly for the last 8 years.
When she was still in a car seat, were you primarily responsible for transport?
My husband would transport her in the mornings, and then I would pick her up on my way home from work again.
I got you. I think the rest of my questions will be better served in an individual capacity. Thank you very much.
I think I can do the same thing. I'm just going to ask a few here. You indicated you have a friend in the DA's office in Fayetteville. Don't tell me what was said. We can take that up later. But I do need to know if you and this friend talked about this case at all.
Not since I have received your response.
I mean, ever.
Yes.
Okay. I'll follow up with that in private. Okay. You said you had done some research on your own regarding the lawyers in the case or the judge. Who did you look up in the case?
Judge, I don't necessarily have an objection to the question, but I think that might fall into a category that we've better delve into in individual capacity if we could hold off on it.
Do you mind?
No, ma'am, I don't mind. Okay, and you also indicated that you were familiar with some public service announcements, particularly ones reminding parents to double check their car. Do Do you have any context of when and where you would have heard these?
Primarily through Facebook.
Okay.
Just going through the feeds and seeing them pop up that other people can share.
All right. Do you know when you would have seen these posts on Facebook?
I can't give you a solid date for that now.
Okay. Well, I guess what I'm asking is something this past year or over the last 5 years?
I would say within the last 2 or 3.
Okay. And you indicated that either you or your spouse had to hire an attorney?
Yes, sir. Real estate transactions primarily.
Okay. All right. You indicated you were familiar with a lot of applications for cell phone, but you did say also that you were familiar with a internet site, Reddit.com.
Yes.
Is that a site you use?
No.
Okay. Do you know what it is?
I have friends that use it, so I am familiar with it.
Okay.
I'm not use it myself.
And just how would you know? How would you know that your friends use it? Is it because are they posting things from it that you see with that Reddit is the source?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Everything else, I'll ask you in just a few minutes. Okay. Thank you. Juror number 28.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
So, a few questions for you. I don't have as many responses for you. I understand you're a welder, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how long have you been working in welding?
25 years.
And your wife is, I just wrote fence and awning. Did I write that wrong, or can you explain in more detail? Okay. All right. I got you. I ran out of room for you, so we have these little cheat sheet, little notes. So I wrote put what your spouse does, and that's why I had a question about it, because I also circled the S, meaning that you're single. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I am single.
Okay. So what I did is I just transposed the two of them, and I wanted to clear that up in my own mind, and I think I've done it. I made more of a mess of it than I needed to. All right. A few questions for you. You indicated that you know somebody in law enforcement, correct? Tell me about that.
I have an uncle that works out at Flexi, and I have a cousin that works for Brunswick Police Department.
Let's talk about the uncle first. What's he do at Flexi?
He's an instructor.
You know anything about your uncle's background that brings him to work as an instructor out there?
Before then, he was chief of police here in Brunswick, Georgia.
Okay. Do you know for which agency?
The Brunswick Police Department.
And then you said, is it a cousin as well? Tell me about your cousin.
He's a lieutenant in the Brunswick Police Department. K-9.
All right. Anything about those relationships in your family that would lead you to believe you couldn't be fair and impartial in this case?
I wouldn't think so.
All right. I think you indicated that you know somebody in the military as well.
Yes, sir. My cousin was in the military.
The same cousin who's...
No, sir.
What branch of the service is this other cousin in? I have down here that you have prior jury service.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was that here in Glen or elsewhere?
Not here in Glenn County. It was in McIntosh, where I grew up at.
How long ago?
10 years ago was the last time.
You said the last time. Has there been more than one?
Oh, yes.
How many times do you think you served?
10.
You think you've served 10 times? You must be the luckiest juror I've ever come across. Let me ask you this then. What's the most serious case you've been involved in as a juror? Because that's a lot to cover. Okay, you were on a murder trial before. How long ago was that?
That was the last one, and that was 6 years ago.
And is that the one in McIntosh? And I don't want to know what the verdict was, but I do want to know, did you reach your verdict?
Yes, sir.
Were you by chance the foreperson of that jury?
No, sir.
I can't see why not, because you would have been the most experienced juror in the room probably.
The other ones were more drug-related.
I see. Okay. So were all of the jury trials that you were involved in, were they all criminal, or did you have some civil ones as well? Stepping down from the murder, what's the next most serious criminal case you were involved in as a juror, if you can remember?
Drug trafficking.
Drug trafficking? How long ago was that?
That was at least 10 years ago.
Again, don't tell me what the verdict was, but did you reach the verdict?
Yes, sir.
Is there anything about any of these prior jury service experiences that would any way impact your ability to be a fair and impartial juror in this case?
I wouldn't think so.
Okay. I have down here, you were asked that broad question, anyone here ever been arrested before, know anyone been arrested before, anything like that? You raised your hand for that.
It was me.
Okay. And I certainly don't mean to pry or embarrass or anything like that. Is this something we can cover here, or would you like to do that individually?
Yes, we can go.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about...
all of them are alcohol-related DUIs.
Okay, so there have been several.
I had an alcohol problem at the time.
Do you think you were treated fairly?
Yes, sir.
Of course, your answer might differ. There might be one time where you say, no, I wasn't treated fairly in this instance, but the other times I would...
All of them were the same. It was my fault for every one of them.
Okay. Is there anything about any of those prior instances in your background that would lead you to think that you couldn't be fair and impartial in this particular case?
I wouldn't think so.
All right. I think that those are all of the individual questions. I do have some other topics we're going to cover with you when we get you in a more private setting, okay?
If it's all right, I'll just reserve my questions till we're in a more private setting. If the state does not object, I would like to cover his GCIC with him at that time. I don't object. I think that would be a smart idea. All right. That brings us up to Juror 29. How are you? Doing pretty good, thanks. Okay. Your background, I have you in retail sales, is that correct? How long have you been doing that?
I guess since I graduated high school, so about 10 years.
Okay. Always at the same place or different places?
No, different places. This is my third job on.
Do you enjoy it?
Yes.
You indicated that you know somebody that works for some sort of child protective service such as DFACS?
My grandma used to work for DFACS before she retired a few years ago.
Do you know what she did with DFACS?
I have no clue.
Okay. There were not a lot of questions that you raised your hand on. Some of those we're going to deal with in a more private setting. You indicated, though, that you know somebody, maybe yourself, who's communicated with somebody you didn't know online. Is that correct?
Yeah, I know a few people who have communicated with random people online, and I myself have accepted random friend requests.
Okay. You say friend requests like through Facebook and things like that? I didn't have down here, unless my notes are inaccurate, but we asked about a bunch of stuff about technology and whether people were familiar with different things, and I didn't get to see that I had a response for you. Tell me a little bit about your understanding of technology and some of those applications that we went through.
I use Facebook a lot. I get on Instagram to look at pictures. I get on YouTube to watch how-to videos and tons of music. Those are like the only ones I ever use. I know about all the other ones, except for that Scout one, but I've never been on other ones.
Okay. The Kick and Whisper you've at least heard of? And then you don't use those yourself? All right. Who do you know that's been arrested before?
My brother for a DUI and my father for several other things.
We won't have to get into the details of it. I'm certainly not trying to pry, but what's the nature of...
My father, I know one was like for drag racing. There might have been some DUIs, but the more
serious one was for statutory rape.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk about that a little bit later. This may also fall into that category too, and you tell me if it does. There was a question that was posed about knowing anyone that has either been investigated for abuse or reported an investigation of abuse. Is that similar to what we were talking about in the previous question, or is that something different when you raise your hand?
Oh, it's pretty similar.
Okay. Let's deal with that in a more private setting as well. So I believe all the rest of the questions I have would fall into those general categories. Thank you, ma'am. With the court's permission, I'll just talk to her in private. I'll if you think to follow up on Judge.
Thank you.
Juror number 30. You doing all right today?
Yes, I am.
Good. I have down here that you're retired from management, correct? And if my notes are correct, 200 employees?
Correct.
Do you supervise all of those?
At one point, I did, and I had production managers that reported to me, just filtered down.
I got you. So you would manage the managers who would then manage all the other employees.
Overall responsible for the whole facility.
And then similarly, your wife worked quality control for the same company. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you meet at the company?
No.
And does she have any supervisory capacity there? And how long you been retired?
10 years.
You know somebody in the military?
I was in the military.
Tell me about your service, please.
I was active in Vietnam era.
Okay.
I was in the Navy.
Well, appreciate your service. How long did you serve?
2 years.
When it comes to social media and all those apps and all the things we've been talking about, I've got a big circle with a line through it for you. You don't do any of that kind of stuff?
When I retired, I didn't need anything, so I don't get involved in it.
Okay.
I do text occasionally.
No Facebook or anything like that?
Not interested.
Had you heard about, I assume some of the things on that list you at least are familiar with them and that you've heard about them before, such as YouTube, Craigslist. Are you?
And Facebook, that's
And Facebook. The other ones, not so much.
I didn't hear of them until just now.
Okay. What do you like to do now that you're retired? I hope you're doing something fun.
Anything I want to do.
Okay, good for you. And I have down here that you know somebody's been arrested before.
Yes.
Who's that?
Brother-in-law.
What was he arrested for?
It might be a long story, so might be able to do this in private, I guess.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
And then last question I think I have until we get to the more private setting is, you know somebody that's experienced the sudden loss of a child?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, it was quite a few years ago, but it was probably 30 years ago. It was a close friend of mine. I walked her down the aisle for marriage because her father had passed away, and she had a child and had an illness and passed away around 6 months.
Okay. Thank you, sir. If you cleared this up already, I apologize. I may have missed it. You have 4 grandkids?
No, I had one.
One grandkid that's 4 months.
Right.
Okay. And where does that grandchild live?
Hampton, Virginia.
All right. Have you gotten to go visit yet?
Yes, I have.
Congratulations. Now to the back row. Juror 31. How long ago did you retire from DFACS?
03. After 34 years of service.
Good for you. That's a tough place to work for 34 years. So you worked there your whole professional career?
I did part in another state division.
Okay.
But I did probably 25 years with DFACS.
Did you ever supervise or manage anyone?
I had a team at one point. We were recruiting for foster homes, and I supervised the workers of those that was on our team in about 6 counties.
Gotcha. I have down here that your husband works on Sea Island. Is that correct?
Yes, he does.
And what does he do there?
He's a chauffeur, works in the transportation department.
Well, this is a good place to retire.
Oh, absolutely.
Who is it that you know that works in defense or does defense work?
Do what now?
There was a question about anyone here know any defense attorney or anyone who does criminal defense?
My ex-brother-in-law.
Okay. And then similarly, there's a question, do you know anyone in the court system after 34 years in DFACS? I would assume you know quite a few people in the court system. Is that all professionally, or is there anyone that you...
No, one is not. One's a real dear friend. She's a bailiff for Judge Lane.
Okay. And how do you know the bailiff?
How do I know her?
Mm-hmm.
She was the secretary, she was in the juvenile court system. That's right. And then since we both retired, we're part of this little group that gets together once a month.
Okay, great.
It's a good time. And we yard sale every Saturday together.
Oh, excellent. Well, if anything I've learned from doing this jury selection process, this is also the place to do yard sales. I've heard about the big Clinton County. I didn't know about that there was a whole county-wide yard sale.
That's my husband and my therapy every Saturday morning.
Okay, great. Well, I won't ask you for your address for protecting your privacy, but who do you know that works in the military or has been in the military?
My brother was killed in Vietnam. He was in the Army.
I'm sorry.
My husband's retired Navy CB. I have a nephew who is in the he's in the Army. And my son-in-law is retired Marine. And I have my sister's son-in-law is with the Coast Guard. No, wait a minute. No, he's with the reserves.
Okay.
Coast Guard Reserves.
Coast Guard Reserves.
Yeah.
All right, so Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard. Almost got all the branches there, so if you...
You're a military fan.
It sounds like it. Who do you know that works in the legal profession? Is that again related to your work with DFACS?
No, I have a friend who's a judge.
Who's that friend?
Juvenile court judge.
Okay.
And my ex-brother-in-law was a traffic judge at one time.
Your DFACS work, was that always here in Glenn County, or have you been, are you a transplant here since retirement?
No, I worked here for about 15 years. I also worked in Houston County.
Okay.
On Robbins and in that area.
All right. You know somebody that works in the medical profession?
Yes, I have a sister-in-law, or ex-sister-in-law, who's a nurse. I have a friend from the Ellsworth who's a nurse. I have a friend who is a psychiatrist here and in Camden. I think this is our other office.
That was my next question. The question was, do you know anyone that works in the mental health profession? And is that the individual you were thinking of?
Yes.
Okay. And you have prior jury service, is that correct?
Yes.
How long ago?
Probably. It was a federal case. It's been a long time ago.
Do you remember, was it a criminal or a civil case?
It was civil.
Did you reach a verdict?
Yes.
Were you by chance the foreperson?
No.
How did you enjoy the experience?
It was okay.
Is there anything about that that might impact your ability to be a fair juror here? You regularly attend church or a member of a church?
Community church, St. Simon's.
And then there was a question about these different applications and messaging and things like that. And I think that you indicated that you text message. Is that correct?
Yeah. My ability with the computer is very limited.
All right.
I do Facebook. I message. I do know about Craigslist. Don't use it, but know about it.
Mm-hmm.
And my granddaughter set up my computer so I don't have to use the face.
Okay.
But I have to go back where she first sent it to me so I can message her and get her on the computer.
You got to bring up the email to make sure you walk through this.
Yeah, email. Yeah.
All right. But as for those other list of apps that we went through, you weren't as familiar. Okay.
On Twitter and none of that stuff.
Legal interest, you indicated that you have some. Is that accurate?
Legal interest?
Right, like TV shows, could be reality.
I'm an avid watcher of Criminal Minds, NCIS. What else do I watch?
Most of the fiction shows, or do you like the reality as well?
No, most of the fiction.
I do have that you followed at least some docudrama before.
Well, of course, everybody gets O.J. Simpson. And also the little girl that was murdered.
John Bonet?
Yeah.
John Bonet Ramsey?
I just recently watched that.
Yeah, that case actually happened out in Colorado, but she's actually buried up in Cobb County where she had some family. I have here that you actually had some prior paid work dealing with children. Were you referring to your DFACS work when you answer that?
It was a volunteer work with a camp with children. We took them to Africa by the Sea for a week of camp. But I still got my pay, but you volunteered for the program, so I don't have one.
You did the right thing. We encouraged you at the beginning. When in doubt, raise your hand and we'll sort it through. So that's kind of a hybrid of both. Volunteer, but you're also getting paid in your professional capacity as well.
I did that for 2 or 3 summers.
I see. You've worked as a caretaker for somebody before?
Yes, my ex-mother-in-law lived with me for 6 weeks before she passed.
And I think I already know the answer to this. You've testified in cases before, had to go to court and be a witness. Is that all related to DFACS, or were there instances where you had to go to court and testify outside of your work capacity?
My divorce.
That would count. Any other time? There was a question that asked, do you know anyone that's dealt with the sudden, unexpected loss of a child? I believe you raised your hand there.
Yes.
Can you tell me about
My son-in-law has recently lost his son.
I'm so sorry.
And I have a friend that lives up at the north end of the county that lost her only girl and her infant son and her mother-in-law all in one accident.
Was it a car wreck?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me, I'm going to go back to your son-in-law first of all. How old was his son that he lost?
26. So car accident.
So these were both wrecks.
Yes.
You have some connection to Cobb County, either yourself or family members. We asked a series of questions involving Cobb County. I believe for at least one of those you raised your hand and said that you knew something about the county.
Well, I have some friends that live in that area.
Okay.
I have a cousin that lives in Cobb. And I'm not sure where my niece is. I'm not sure what county she's in.
How often do you go up there, if at all?
No.
You don't?
That's a terrible place to be. Traffic is too much.
I was about to say, it's a great place to be. The traffic is a bit of a nightmare, though.
Give me our little corner of the world any day.
If you were here for the last panel, you'd see that we had a very spirited discussion about the traffic situation in the metro Atlanta area, so I totally understand.
It's getting to be a little too crowded.
Well, you know, when we were leaving the DA's office here, and they said, you know, I hear you got some traffic going back to St. Simon, so we were all buckling and waiting to
You never saw it.
I didn't see a thing. I was like,
See, our interpretation of traffic, I'm sure, is totally different.
well, they had a little computer up too, and it had little orange things and stuff. So I was expecting the worst. But when we hear traffic, we're not going anywhere. So, all right. I believe the rest of the questions I have for you, Juror 31, are more appropriately should be handled in a private context. So I'll reserve those.
Hey, good afternoon. I think when you initially answered the question about having to do with your employment, did you indicate that you were a CPS investigator?
Yes,
Okay. And you did that for 10 years?
about 10 years.
Okay. And did you have arrest powers?
Oh, no, juvenile.
Okay. Did you ever have to go and make home visits into a home where there was at least indication where there may have been a crime that has occurred or is occurring?
My initial case in Houston County had to do with that.
Okay.
And the child was shot. And they called us out to the investigation. Yes.
Okay. Would you ever be in a situation where you would either go to a home or a scene or perhaps even an interview where you would be accompanied by a police officer?
Would I have gone to a home accompanied by a police officer? Yes, in Houston County, you always have a police officer with you when you go out.
Okay.
On child abuse cases. So, yes, I did.
All right. Did you sit in on police interviews or did they sit in on your interviews?
We both sat in the interviews.
Okay. So it sounds like the way it worked in Houston, and I'm assuming the way it worked here is the way it kind of works everywhere, is that CPS sort of works in tandem with local PD.
Yes.
Okay, on child-related cases.
Yes.
And did that ever include cases where a juvenile was the offender or a juvenile was charged?
No.
Okay, so it was strictly cases of deprivation or some assaultive behavior or something against a child. Okay. Did you make reports, written reports, when you would do an investigation as a CPS officer? You did? Okay. And you, yeah. And did you ever review the police officer's report who was with you at the time or doing a concurrent investigation?
I don't know that I ever reviewed his report.
Okay. So you would do your report and file it, and the officer who was doing his investigation would do his report and file it, and whatever he said, he said.
Well, you would have a hearing
Okay.
for the juvenile court judge, and he would have testified, so that
Okay. But you didn't have access to his written report?
not necessarily.
Okay. I'm assuming over this number of years, and 10 years with CPS, that you probably went to court a lot. Okay. Every week?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
See, if you're an investigator, now part of that 10 years when I was investigating, I may take cases that have already been investigated, and I would be like an ongoing worker with them.
Okay.
So, but probably we always had court scheduled weekly, and it just depended upon whether you had a case that week or not. But court was always scheduled on a weekly basis.
Okay. When you would be in a court setting, were you sequestered or outside the courtroom when the other witnesses would testify, or did y'all just allow everybody to sort of sit in there? And okay. Were you ever in a situation where you heard perhaps other witnesses, in particular other CPS officers or other police law enforcement officers, who were telling the same, testifying about the same case you were testifying about, but their testimony, their facts weren't exactly the same as yours? Okay. So all these years of going into court, whatever it was that you heard others testify to, it always matched up with what your report said?
Well, no, except for the parents.
Right. Well, the parents were on the other side.
No.
Okay. All right. And in juvenile court, you had trials before judges only, right?
Yes.
You didn't have juries?
No.
Okay. So you didn't have to go through all this,
No.
all this kind of stuff. All right. Okay. I believe you indicated that either you or your spouse had to hire an attorney, and I'm assuming that was for the divorce you're telling us about?
Yes.
Okay. And I believe you indicated that your divorce was a contested divorce where you had a trial?
No, it was before the judge.
Okay. You had a trial?
Technically, the witnesses in it was just before the judge.
Okay. You just had a trial. There was just no jury. It was just a trial before the judge.
Exactly.
Okay. So you had one side, he had the other side.
Yeah.
Okay. And y'all's...
It was one of those typical stories. Move to Haskell County, work, put your husband through law school, come back and get divorced, and he marries an attorney.
So I take it then you filed.
Yes, I
You
did.
filed. Okay. And when y'all went to court, I'm assuming that what he testified to didn't exactly sound like the truth to you, did it? Okay. How long had you been married to him?
24 years.
Okay. 24 years. And when you were sitting there in court, did you tell your attorney, hey, that man I was married to for 24 years, what he's saying is not true?
Oh, yes.
He's giving false testimony. Okay. All right. I think everything else, a couple of other things, we'll talk to you in just a few minutes. Thank you. Hey, Juror 32. Doing all right this afternoon?
Yeah.
I have down here that you used to work as a carpenter, correct? And what are you doing now?
Watching TV.
Okay, you're retired?
And I'm the same.
Okay. And how long you been out of work?
Except for May 18.
So that's a relatively recent thing.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm very sorry to hear that. What are you doing now that you're not working? I mean,
I get up, take my son to work, and
Okay.
go home.
Okay.
I take my little niece to school, and I go
Okay.
watch TV.
all right. So you're at least, whatever your disability is, you're at least able to get out and do things and stuff like that.
Not much.
Okay.
Not much at all.
Very good. Now, I have down here that you have some prior management experience and ability to hire and fire. Can you tell me about that? How many people?
8.
Is this the last place you work as a carpenter?
No, this is back before the economy went to option.
What type of company was it?
This construction company. I built homes
Have you always worked in construction?
since I got out of high school.
Who do you know in the military?
My dad was in the military.
What branch of the service?
Army.
I have down here that you regularly attend church.
Used to, yeah.
Okay.
Tore down.
All right. Which church did you attend?
Glendale Baptist Church.
there was some questions about use of computers and social media and all that kind of stuff, and you're shaking your head. That's not for you.
Son does all that. If I need to know something, I'll say trouble. I've got a flip phone.
Okay.
I could turn on a computer if needed.
Do you even text at all from?
Well, yes, because my kids won't talk to me. They tell me to text. Made me learn.
You had to learn by default, huh?
I did.
All right. There's some legal interests that you were asked about, and you raised your hand and said that you have some. Can you tell me about that?
Such as?
TV shows, books.
Yeah. Well, I watch all the documentaries, the actual documentaries, like the John Bonet case and stuff. But, I mean, I'm not able to get out and do much, so I lay around and watch them all day.
All right. And that kind of answers the next question about docudramas. I was going to ask you if there are any particular that you followed. You already mentioned John Bonet. Is that one of them?
That's the one that the kids on.
Right. A lot of
sad. There's nothing on TV. I mean,
sure. Any others that you can think of? Did you watch People versus OJ or anything like that?
I worked later and I didn't have time for all that.
Okay. I have down here that you volunteered with children in some capacity in the past.
Yeah, I used to be a volunteer firefighter, and I went to up north there, south of Atlanta, Forsyth, and became a clown. And we go to schools and try to teach kids about fire safety.
Okay. All right. And then I also have down here that in some time in your past, you've worked in some capacity as a caretaker, taking care of.
Yes, sir.
All right. Don't mean to pry or embarrass or anything, but there was a question that was asked about, do you know anyone, including yourself, who's ever been arrested before? Can you tell me about that?
Well, I think we'll do it private. Okay.
That's not a problem with me. Let me just mark that, and we'll come back to that. You've also given a statement to law enforcement in the past, is that correct? Can you tell me about that?
I watched a guy pull a gun and blow his brains out, and we had to tell him what happened.
Wow. When was this?
Back in the early 90s.
Who was this person to you? So police were called out to this suicide, and of course everybody in the neighborhood that saw something, I assume you had to give a statement because of what you saw. There was a question that broadly asked, is there anyone here that knows anyone that's ever been investigated for abuse or had to report abuse or anything like that? And I think you raised your hand for that. Okay. There was a question that asked about Cobb associations and whether you know anyone that lives in Cobb, or maybe you used to live in Cobb County.
I've got cousins that live in Marietta. In that Cobb County?
It's the heart of Cobb County. That's the county seat, city of Marietta. How often you visit with them, if at all?
I don't. Haven't seen them in 30 years.
I got you. So you're distant cousins, it sounds like. You ever been up to Cobb or anything? Been to Marietta?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Only other questions I have for you, in addition to the one that you asked to talk about in private, we can bring up in a more private context. Thank you, sir.
When have you been to Marietta?
Say it again, sir?
When have you been to Marietta?
10 years ago.
Okay.
I went up that way to see a concert when she stayed in Marietta.
Do you remember what area you were in? Is that the only time, to the best of your recollection, that you've ever been to Marietta?
We stayed, yes, sir. I've been through it quite a few times.
Okay. Just traveling through?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, farming in Tennessee.
Okay. So you would just take 75 north?
Sir, Interstate 24.
Right through Marietta? Okay. How often would you take that trip?
3-4 times a year.
When's the last time you've been up that way?
About 10 years ago.
Okay.
10 years, I'm not sure.
All right, thank you.
All right, juror number 33. I have down here that you work in management currently, correct?
Yes, sir.
How long you been doing that?
This company's 16.
You had prior management?
The same field.
Restaurant business? How long total have you worked in the restaurant industry?
20 plus.
Is that your whole professional career, or have you done other things?
No, I did some other things that probably come back.
Okay. What other things have you done?
I did construction for a little while, survey, martial arts instruction for a little while, and that's about it. And I'll come back to restaurants again.
I have down here that your wife works in is it merchandising? Is that correct? What type of stuff?
She works for a company that does various companies, Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson.
All right. How many total employees do you manage?
One.
Is this a single restaurant, or
Yes, sir.
who do you know in law enforcement?
My uncle used to be, he just now got out of GBI and runs the police. I have a friend of mine that just joined runs the police department.
Okay. You also know some individuals with a military background.
That was my uncle. He's Marines. Also have a friend that was also Marines. He just got out. Another one that was Navy. That's the other branches yet.
Who do you know that works in DFACS or in Child Protective Services?
It's my mother-in-law. She works for Paulding County, the school system. I'm not sure of her title, but it has to do with Child Protective Services of some sort. She has to go to homes and visit at-risk children and things like that.
How long has she been doing that? Do you know?
10 years now.
In terms of social media, you're another one that I put a circle with a line through. It doesn't sound like you're big.
Some talking, yeah, the email, that's about it. Trying to mess with dealers.
You on Facebook at all?
2 accounts, never been on either one of them.
Just not your thing. That whole list that we went through.
The last 3 I wasn't familiar with, the rest of them.
So at least YouTube and Craigslist, you'd heard of. But the last 3, Kick, Scout, Whisper, those.
And Reddit, yeah,
I have down here that you've got some sort of legal interest. We went through those categories of.
Yeah, I don't like the some of the shows, the fiction of some documentaries, the OJ Joe, make some of those.
What trial did you follow?
OJ, of course, back in the day. Joe may have been as well.
You've been paid to work with children in some capacity? That makes sense. How long did you do that?
I did that for 4 years.
Was it Taekwondo or what?
It was American Karate. I worked for Joe Boy and then another company after that.
There's a question that I asked you about arrest, and I'm going to hold off on that and do that in a more private context if we can do that. I do have down here, though, that you gave a statement to law enforcement in the past. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, just somebody, a guy came beating on our front door trying to get in, and then somebody came beating on the back door another night.
So you're kind of intruders on your property or something. Were these people you knew, or?
No, never seen them. They thought they lived there.
Okay. That sounds like a call the police situation then, doesn't it?
I told we didn't live there.
Yeah. All right. I hope that law enforcement was able to convince him that he was in the wrong.
No, he still thought he lived there.
Okay. For the Chick-fil-A question we asked, and there was one specific that asked, are you familiar with a particular Chick-fil-A that's up off of 285 in Cobb County?
Pretty sure for me. I used to live in Atlanta, in the Gwinnett area. My brother lives in Kennesaw. So a lot of times we would drive through to get to him, and I'm pretty sure I'm familiar with that. We did that one before. I think I've been that there before. It's been a little while since I've been in Atlanta, so.
Okay. Your brother still lives in Kennesaw?
Yes.
And how often you visit him, would you say?
Sadly, it's been a while. It's been at least 5 years.
All right. A few questions for you privately. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. W., You indicated that you had some familiarity with public service announcements, specifically reminding parents to double-check their cars for children. Do you have any recollection of when and where you would have heard those?
I know it's been in the last 2-3 years or so. I know I've heard it, I've seen it on TV, and I know I've seen a billboard at one point. I don't know if it was in Florida or here, but I've seen it billboard.
All right. Do you recall if one of those that you heard was the Look Again campaign?
Do not recall if that was the campaign.
Okay. All right, and I believe that you indicated you'd also had familiarity with similar public service announcements reminding people not to leave animals in a car. Okay, and do you have any recollection of sort of the context when and where you would have been exposed to those PSAs?
The most recent one, I know there's a vet that I drive by when they're working. They actually have it up on their signage.
Okay.
Be aware, just make sure you check your fence over the evening.
Okay. You ever seen, you don't use Facebook. You ever seen anything on TV, any PSAs on TV about not leaving pets in cars?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. All right, your daughter's 14? Is that right? So it's been a while since y'all had to use a car seat. But you did recall that when it was time to purchase a car seat that y'all did a little research on it before you purchased. Did you do that on the internet?
Yes.
All right. And why were you researching car seats? What was it you were looking for?
Kind of like before, I mean, we were looking at safety ratings. I was looking at which ones look up as the car seats. Cars have the new types of security things. I want to make sure that it fits with our car and that kind of thing.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to follow up with everything else in private. Thank you. Jar 34. A few questions for you. I have down here that you are a financial manager. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, that's what I'm doing currently. I've been with a main religious denomination for the last almost 9 years.
Okay.
And I do everything to do with financial investments and grants and accounting.
Is this a church?
It's not a church. It's a regional office for a major denomination. So there's like 44 churches in the region. So I do all of the accounting and investments and requests and all that.
And you said, did I catch 9 years?
Yeah.
What did you do before that?
Well, my husband was in the military, so we traveled all over the country. And so I've had a lot of jobs. I spent 10 years at the South Carolina State Bar as the director of Law for Services and their legal and pro bono clinics. And then I worked at UC Irvine in California. My husband moved to Disney out there, and I worked in their Office of Legacy, requests, donations, again, money management and accounting.
Okay. The work that you did with the South Carolina State Bar, was it just the lawyer referral service?
It was the lawyer referral service. I directed that, and I also directed and managed their legal clinics throughout the state and pro bono services. We had Ask the Lawyer, which was on the telephone. I did all of that.
So you helped set up and manage trainings and things like that?
Yes.
CLEs is what we call it.
Yeah, Supreme Court was right. We were Yeah, I think, I don't know if you're familiar with South Carolina State Bar, there's one law school. We have one big building in downtown Columbia.
Yep.
And so you have Rule 5 there, Supreme Court, is in that building.
Yeah, they used to have one of the national prosecutors' office right there in Columbia, so we're familiar.
Exactly. The Capitol's there.
Right. Similarly, here in Georgia, the state bar is it's very close to where our Supreme Court is because they work kind of closely together.
Right.
All right. So I assume that the first question I have for you about knowing people that have done defense work, is that through your work with the South Carolina State Bar?
Yes, and we have neighbors, close friends. I have a close friend whose son is a corporate lawyer in California, and we had very, very good friends in Columbia, South Carolina. Our neighbor was a defense attorney, partner in a law firm there.
Similarly, being associated with criminal defense organizations, is that through your bar work as well?
Yes.
Are you still involved with any of those, or?
No, because it's South Carolina, but I'm still in contact with a lot of friends because I worked there for so long that still are with the bar.
Sure. And the next question, I don't want to make assumptions that aren't true, so you please correct me if I'm wrong. There's a question about knowing people that work within the court system. Again, is that as your work in the state bar?
Yes.
Okay. You've already talked a little bit about your work as a financial manager. Tell me about working in management and being able to hire and fire people in the past.
Well, when I worked as a director at the state bar, I had an office of 15 people. A lot of them were intake operators, working with the public, and then just clerks and receptionists. And I hired those, and I fired those.
Who do you know in law enforcement?
My brother was a juvenile probation officer and a Los Angeles sheriff's deputy for over 30 years. He's retired.
What about in the military? Obviously, your husband would qualify as a long-time military.
He's a West Point graduate.
Okay. And is he retired military? Is that correct?
Yes.
What's he do now?
He works for a private corporation. He's in upper management. In logistics.
Okay. Who do you know that has medical training or works in the medical field?
Well, my daughter-in-law's a nurse. Her father is a pediatric physician in Richmond, Virginia.
You know somebody that works in the mental health field?
Yes. My friend's son is a lawyer. His sister is has a doctorate in clinical psychology.
I'm going to have to draw that one out. Friend, say that again. Friend?
It's a very close friend of mine. Her daughter is a clinical psychologist in California.
How close are you to this individual?
We spent a lot of time together over the last 8-9 years.
All right. And you also know somebody that works in some sort of child protective service organization, DFACS, something like that.
Well, it was my brother when he was a juvenile probation officer.
That makes sense. And this may apply to your brother as well. It's somebody who's got some experience with criminology. There was a question, a very broad question that asked if you've ever been associated with any fraternal organizations, professional organizations. The state bar would certainly count. Is that what you were thinking of?
Well, I also belong to the Glenn County Republican Women's, and I belong to the Brunswick Women's Club and the Magnolia Garden Club, and a professional organization for female executives.
All right. You have some familiarity with messaging and applications and things like that. Well, tell me primarily, where are you on the spectrum of being able to use it?
In my job, we have a website, and when I worked at the bar, we had a website. So I did a lot of publishing on that website. And so I'm very familiar with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and anything that you would use social media to get your message across.
Okay. What about those last ones, are the ones that most people have said, I'm not...
One of that group would be Reddit, and I know that's really kind of a free-for-all information. People just post whatever they want. I've been on that occasionally, but it doesn't really interest me. So.
Kick, a Scout.
Never heard of those.
Whisper. There was a question that asked, have you ever interacted with somebody online that you didn't know?
And that would be people that are asking questions and want information.
Have you ever written a letter to the editor or posted anything online, like an opinion?
Yes.
Okay. You fall in one or both of those categories?
Both.
Okay.
I've written letters to the editor throughout the years.
About?
Mostly politics.
Okay.
I'm very interested in politics. And right now, I put a lot of opinions about politics on Facebook because of the presidential election.
This is the time when you start to see a lot of those things on Facebook for those that choose to post something.
Right.
You also, one of the few people said you called into a radio show or something like that. Is that just the same kind of thing, politics, or?
Well, it's funny. There was a time a few years ago where there was a local radio. This is when we were living in South Carolina. That I would call in because I had an opinion and I would get in right away. Mm-hmm. And then since then I've done it, but the lines are always busy. So there was a period where I was calling quite a bit.
Okay.
I'm opinionated.
All right. Along the lines of legal interest, you indicate that you followed some docudramas and followed trials before.
Yeah, there were obviously the O.J. Simpson. I was working at the State Bar at that time, so that was a huge day.
Sure.
And then the other one that I remember is the little girl Casey Anthony in Florida.
Right.
That one I followed because it had to do with a little girl, and there's probably been a few in between there that I think the Jody Arias case. I followed that out in Arizona because I am from California originally, so that kind of piqued my interest. But I don't watch I don't watch any of those legal shows. That just does not interest me, probably because I worked at the bar for so long.
You know it's a little bit different then, right?
Yeah, that's what you do.
You volunteered with children in some capacity, is that correct? Tell me about that.
Well, when my kids were little, they belonged to a cooperative preschool, so you had to volunteer like once a month to help the kids out. There's been, I was with lunch buddies at the South Carolina bar. The staff was required to work with inner city kids in their lunch buddy program, so I did that.
You've worked in some capacity as a caretaker for another person. Who is that?
My mother. She just passed away in April.
I'm sorry.
I had to fly out there several times to California to be with her. And my father, I just came back from California sick. He's 91 years old, and I was out there to get some things. I'm the executor of their will, so I was trying to get some paperwork and stuff together to make sure he was okay.
You've indicated that you've had a negative experience with law enforcement.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Well, it was a traffic ticket. This was about 6 years ago. And it was, the police officer said I didn't stop at a stop sign. And I did go to court and I fought it because he lied, and the judge threw it out because I could prove that he lied.
Okay. Where was that happened?
That was here in Lynn County.
Is there anything about that situation you think would impact your ability to be fair in this case?
Well, it does kind of color your, about your law enforcement system.
Sure.
It gives it a little color to it,
You had a bad experience with a police officer, and can you separate that and view this case on its merits, or is that something that you think is going to impact your ability to do that?
I'll be honest with you, I really don't know.
All right. Well, I might follow up a little bit more about that in private. You've indicated that you've known somebody that's been arrested before. Is that correct?
Yes.
Who's that?
Many years ago, I had a couple of cousins that were involved in drugs as teenagers and were arrested and ended up in jail. But that was back in the late 60s. I mean, a long, long, long time ago. I was a kid.
There was a question that we posed. Does anyone here think that you know somebody that's been falsely accused of a crime? And you had a question for that, as I recall.
Whether it was a felony or a misdemeanor.
Sure. Was this in reference to what we were just talking about that I said we'd take up in private, or is this something else?
No, I mean, it was basically a close family member was arrested for something. It was thrown out because it was proven somebody gave false, called in a complaint, and it was proven to be false. And
all right. I think that the rest of the questions I have for you can be dealt with in private. Thank you, ma'am.
I was writing as fast as I could, and I'm afraid I missed the last thing. I missed the last thing you said about somebody calling in a complaint?
Oh, it was a close relative. Somebody had called in a complaint about them, and it was proven not to be true.
Okay. Was this a defects complaint?
No, didn't have anything to do with children. It was some altercation.
Okay. All right. So you mean called in a complaint to the police?
Somebody called in a complaint to the police.
Okay. How did you find out about it?
Because they told me.
Okay. Did they get arrested?
I believe they did.
Your cousin got arrested?
Yes.
Okay. Did he or she have to hire a lawyer and go to court?
I believe they did, and that's where it was thrown out.
Okay. And would you have any way of knowing, was it a citizen that called in this complaint, or was it a law?
It's a neighbor.
A neighbor. Okay. So you weren't living there, so your information is limited to whatever they passed on to you.
Because we weren't in the court, and we weren't a witness, and this is just like the telephone, this is what happened, and I might need bail money, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And they didn't.
Yeah, it's the phone starts ringing when folks need bail money. All right. Mr. Evans indicated he wanted to talk to you in private about your traffic stop situation, so I'm going to honor his request, and I'll do the same and hold off on that. Just a couple of other little things, though, that I had asked you about in the general questions. I believe that you also had indicated you had some familiarity with public service announcements, such as the Look Again campaign.
Yeah, the PSA announcements on television, the ones with the dogs that are being abused, and there were some about not to leave in the summer, not to leave your children in hot cars and things like that. But I can't recall like on what channel or.
Okay. All right. You believe though it was on TV?
Yes.
All right. Wasn't something that you saw on Facebook?
No, it wasn't on Facebook. It was on TV.
We've heard some other people indicate they've seen billboards of those type of public service announcements. Have you ever seen any billboard to that effect?
Not that I can recall.
You raised your hand indicating that you had some familiarity with products on the market right now to prevent parents from accidentally leaving their children in cars.
Well, I'm pretty sure I saw on Facebook with all this, because there's been so many that it seems like in the last few years that they're coming out with these products now that, like little buzzers and things that if a child's not there, a buzzer goes off in the car seat. But that's just recently. I want to say probably in the last, 3-4 months, I've noticed more than.
The last 3 or 4, since it's been hot, summer.
Okay. Yeah, since it got really hot.
And you believe these products you did see on Facebook?
I think so.
Okay.
I think people shared those links.
All right. And you indicated you used the word buzzer. Are you talking about that? The product incorporates a buzzer.
Something to do with, some kind of, and maybe not a buzzer, but some kind of indicator.
Okay. And do you have any recollection of what you saw, if it was a product by a car seat manufacturer or a auto manufacturer?
Yeah, I think what they are just people that are inventing these things now because it's become a problem.
Entrepreneurs?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see, you indicated that you or your husband, one, had to hire an attorney before. By any chance, this isn't the traffic stop you're telling us about 6 years ago, is it?
No, this was just for wills and real estate transactions.
Okay.
For the last few years.
Okay. All right. You indicated that you knew a family member or friend who'd had an affair. Is that something you can tell us about?
Let me think about that.
And listen, I wrote down a lot of stuff here, so if I got that number wrong with you, I don't want to tax you.
My brother, who was divorced, his wife had an affair.
Okay.
With several men. Over many years.
And they're not still married?
And he finally divorced her.
Okay. And I take it you and she are not friendly?
I hate her.
Okay. All right, and you've already told us that you have some familiarity with Reddit. And I believe what you said was it was a information.
I'm very always curious about social media, and so that was one of the things that, like on Facebook, people would say, "Oh, I got that from," they'd link it, like this information from Reddit. So I'm curious. I went on there. Basically, it's just an information. Anybody can put anything, trolls, whatever they want to do.
Okay.
So I didn't really have an interest because I didn't feel like it was probably very truthful. You know.
Okay. A dumping ground for information of any sort.
Exactly.
Okay. Articles, stories, posts,
made up stuff,
videos, whatever. Not your thing.
No.
Okay. But some people that you know that are in your Facebook feed apparently from time to time have linked an article or post or story or video from Reddit, and it came to your Facebook.
Yeah, and you have to understand too, in Facebook, you know, you can have a certain amount of friends that are posting things, but and I'm sure everybody's familiar with this. You have these advertisements that come in unsolicited and articles that come unsolicited. They're just there. Right. And most of the time you can hide them from your feed or delete them or complain about them, but they're just there. A lot of those kind of things just kind of pop up on your feed.
Okay. All right. I think that's all I need to get from you right now.
We're going to take a short recess. Break until 5 after. You all keep an open mind. Don't discuss this matter with each other at all. Just take a nice break.
All right, Jerry. Watch yourself going down.
I guess I'll take a break.